Hello, dear wanderers of the wizarding world. Welcome back to another evening together, another night of shared stories and gentle exploration through the halls we've come to know so well. It's late now, and if you're listening to this, perhaps you found yourself in that comfortable in-between space where the day has ended, but sleep hasn't quite found you yet. That's exactly where I hope you'll stay for a while. Tonight, we're going to do something a little different. We're not following anyone on grand adventures or daring quests. No, tonight is about something quieter, something softer. Tonight, we're simply going to walk the corridors of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry after the students have gone to bed, after the teachers have retired to their quarters, after the house elves have finished their work in the kitchens below. We're going to explore this ancient castle not as it appears in daylight, bustling with energy and noise, but as it exists in these late hours, when shadows stretch long across stone floors, and the only sound is the occasional creak of settling timbers or the whisper of wind through narrow windows. Think of me as your guide for this evening, a sort of magical historian, or perhaps an archivist who's spent countless nights wandering these very halls, collecting stories, observing the way candlelight plays against medieval stonework, listening to what the castle itself might tell us if we're patient enough to hear it. You don't need to remember names or dates or specific events. You don't need to take notes or quiz yourself later. All you need to do is listen, let the words wash over you like gentle waves, and allow yourself to drift wherever these stories might take you. The castle is quiet now. Can you hear it? The distant sound of rain beginning to fall against the tall arched windows. The soft hiss and pop of torches burning in their iron sconces. Along the corridor walls, somewhere far above us, in one of the many towers, an owl calls out into the night. The portraits lining the hallways have settled into their frames, some sleeping soundly with tiny painted snores, others whispering to their neighbours in voices too low to make out clearly. We're standing now in a corridor I've always been particularly fond of, one that doesn't see much traffic during the day because it doesn't lead anywhere particularly important. It's tucked away on the third floor, running parallel to one of the more frequently used passages, and its primary feature is a series of tall windows that look out over the castle grounds. During the day, you can see the Forbidden Forest from here, that dark line of ancient trees marking the edge of the known world. But at night, especially on a night like this when clouds obscure the moon and stars, those windows reflect back nothing but our own candlelight, making it feel as though we're suspended in some timeless space. The stones beneath our feet have been worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Students walking to class, teachers pacing thoughtfully, house elves hurrying on their endless errands. If you run your hand along the wall, you can feel the cool, slightly damp texture of the rock. See where generations of magical folk have left their mark, sometimes literally. There's a scorch mark here, just to our left, from some long ago spell that went awry. No one remembers who cast it or when, but it remains, a small testament to imperfection in a place that often demands excellence. This is the Hogwarts I want to show you tonight. Not the Hogwarts of triumph and terror, though those stories have their place. Not even the Hogwarts of daily routine, of rushing to breakfast before class, or cramming for exams in the library. No, this is the Hogwarts that exists in the margins, in the quiet moments, in the spaces between action and rest. This is the Hogwarts that the founders built with intention, that generations of students and teachers have shaped with their presence, that the castle itself has become through centuries of magic soaking into stone and timber and earth. We'll walk together through its history, but slowly, taking our time. We'll pause to consider the founders and their vision, not as legendary figures engaged in dramatic conflicts, but as four people who simply wanted to create something meaningful. We'll explore the castle itself, this living, breathing entity of architecture and enchantment, and try to understand how it works, how it thinks, how it exists from day to day. We'll touch on the traditions of magical learning, the rhythms of the school year, the small rituals that give shape and meaning to life within these walls. And as we go, I encourage you to let your mind wander. If a particular detail catches your imagination, linger there for a moment. If you find yourself drifting towards sleep, don't fight it. That's exactly what this is for. Think of these words not as a narrative you need to follow from beginning to end, but as a companion for your journey into rest, a gentle voice to keep you company as the day releases its hold on you. The rain is falling more steadily now. I can hear it drumming against the windows, see it streaming down the ancient glass in rivulets that catch and fracture the candlelight. It's a comforting sound, the kind that makes you grateful to be inside, to be warm and dry and safe within these thick stone walls. Somewhere in the distance, perhaps in Gryffindor Tower or the Ravenclaw Common Room, a fire crackles in a hearth, sending warmth and golden light into spaces where students are settling down for the night, pulling thick quilts up to their chins, letting the events of the day fade into memory. But we have time yet before we rest. The night is long, and the castle has so much to show us. So take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, settle more comfortably into wherever you are. We're going to start at the very beginning, more than 1,000 years ago, when four of the most gifted magical minds of their age came together with a shared dream and built something that would endure far beyond their own lifetimes. Let's walk together now, our footsteps echoing softly in the empty corridor, our candles casting dancing shadows on the ancient stones. The story of Hogwarts is waiting for us, patient as it has been for centuries, ready to unfold at exactly the pace we need it to. Chapter 1: The Four Founders and Their Quiet Dream. There's a spot in the castle, tucked away in what's now the antechamber, just behind the Great Hall, where a very old tapestry hangs. Most students walk past it without a second glance, which is understandable. It depicts four figures standing together at the foundation of a castle, and it's been there so long that the colours have faded to soft browns and greys, the threads worn thin in places where countless hands have brushed against it over the centuries. But if you stop, if you really look at it in the right light, you can still make out their faces. Godric Gryffindor, with his strong jaw and steady gaze. Helga Hufflepuff, with her kind smile and sturdy frame. Rowena Ravenclaw, with her high forehead and intelligent eyes. Salazar Slytherin, with his aristocratic features and contemplative expression. This is how I like to think of them. Not as the near mythological figures they've become in the stories students tell, but as four real people who lived in a very different world than ours, who faced very real problems and made very human decisions about how to address them. The world they inhabited, this realm of the 10th century, was one where magic and those who wielded it faced persecution at every turn. Common folk feared what they didn't understand, and in their fear, they lashed out with violence. Witch burnings were not yet the organised spectacles they would become in later centuries, but they happened nonetheless. A woman skilled in healing herbs might find herself accused of poisoning. A man who could predict the weather might be called a demon, and those whose magic was too obvious, too powerful to hide, well, they often didn't survive long enough to pass on their knowledge to the next generation. Into this world of fear and danger came four individuals who shared a vision. They wanted to create a place where young witches and wizards could learn to control and refine their magical abilities in safety, away from prying Muggle eyes, in an environment where magic was not something to be feared or hidden, but celebrated and studied. The question wasn't whether such a place was needed. That much was obvious to anyone with magical ability in those dark times. The question was how to build it, how to sustain it, and most importantly, what values it should embody. It's said that Rowena Ravenclaw had a dream. In it, a warty hog led her to a cliff beside a lake, and she took this as a sign. Whether that's literally true, or a story that's been embellished over the centuries, hardly matters. What matters is that they found this spot, here in the Scottish Highlands, where mountains provided natural barriers, and the landscape itself seemed to breathe with ancient magic. The Great Lake stretched out before them, dark and deep, and home to creatures that predated human memory. The Forbidden Forest grew wild and untamed at the edge of the clearing. And the land itself felt right in a way that's difficult to put into words, as if the earth here was welcoming, ready to support something extraordinary. They began to build, not quickly, and certainly not easily. Stone was quarried from the mountains. Timber was harvested from the forest's edges with respect and caution. And as they built, they poured magic into every foundation stone, every beam, every archway and corridor. This wasn't simply construction in the way Muggles understood it. This was the creation of something that would be both building and being. A place that would have its own kind of life, its own way of existing in the world. Godric Gryffindor came from what would one day be known as Godric's Hollow, from wild moors where the wind never stopped blowing, and courage was a necessary trait for simple survival. He valued bravery above all else, not the reckless kind that gets people killed for no reason, but the deep, abiding courage that allows someone to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous. He believed that magical education should be available to all who showed aptitude, regardless of their blood status or family connections. In his view, the ability to perform magic was itself the only credential that mattered. He was also a practical man, skilled in the arts of dueling and combat magic. The sword he had commissioned from Ragnarok I the goblin silversmith was not merely a weapon, but a work of art, gleaming silver inlaid with rubies the size of eggs. The goblins would later claim he'd stolen it, creating a mythology around the sword that persisted for centuries. But those who knew Godric understood that he'd paid fairly for the blade and defended his ownership when challenged. The sword would eventually be imbued with properties that allowed it to present itself to a true Gryffindor in their moment of greatest need, absorbing the qualities of substances it encountered. But in those early days, it was simply a symbol of Godric's commitment to defending what he'd helped to create. Helga Hufflepuff brought a different energy entirely to the founding of Hogwarts. Where Godric valued courage and Rowena prized intelligence, Helga saw virtue in loyalty, hard work, and fairness. She came from the Valley folk, from communities where everyone knew everyone else, and survival depended on cooperation and shared labor. She understood that a school would need more than brilliant teachers and talented students. It would need infrastructure, systems, routines. It would need someone who understood how to create a place where everyone, regardless of their natural abilities, could find a way to contribute and grow. Her recipes, developed over years of careful experimentation, would form the foundation of Hogwarts' legendary feasts. Even now, more than a millennium later, the house elves in the kitchen sands below the Great Hall still prepare dishes using her methods, her combinations of magical and mundane ingredients, her understanding of how food could nourish not just the body, but the spirit as well. She insisted that the school welcome students from all backgrounds. That magical ability wasn't limited to those of pure magical blood, and that everyone deserved a chance to develop their gifts in a supportive environment. The cup she treasured, a golden vessel engraved with a badger, would become one of her most precious possessions, passed down through her descendants until it eventually fell into darker hands. But in those early days, it was simply a cup she drank from at mealtimes, a reminder that even the most ordinary objects could be beautiful and meaningful if treated with care and respect. Rowena Ravenclaw was, perhaps, the most intellectually gifted of the four, a woman whose mind worked in ways that seemed almost beyond human capacity. She valued knowledge not for its own sake, though she loved learning, but for what it could accomplish, how it could be applied to solve problems and create beauty. Her diadem, which she commissioned to enhance the wisdom of the wearer, was both a practical tool and a philosophical statement. Intelligence, in Rowena's view, was meant to be shared, to be increased, to be passed on to the next generation in ever more refined forms. She designed many of the castle's more intricate enchantments, the way the staircases would move to keep students alert and adaptable, the manner in which portraits could communicate with one another and with the living, the subtle protections woven into the very fabric of the building that would keep it hidden from Muggle eyes and hostile intent. Her house would become known for welcoming those who valued wit and learning, who saw education as the highest calling, who understood that a sharp mind could accomplish things that raw power never could. And then there was Salazar Slytherin, the most complicated of the four, the one whose legacy would become most controversial in the centuries to follow. He came from the Fens, from dark and boggy country, where survival required cunning and resourcefulness. He valued ambition and determination, the willingness to use any means to achieve one's ends. And he held strong beliefs about blood purity, about the importance of magical lineage, that would eventually drive a wedge between himself and the others. But in the beginning, before the arguments grew too heated, before the fundamental disagreements about who deserved magical education became irreconcilable, Salazar was simply one of 4 friends working toward a common goal. He was brilliant in his own way, particularly skilled in legilimency and parseltongue, the rare ability to speak with serpents. His contributions to the school's defensive magic were substantial. His understanding of the dark arts, while troubling to some, was encyclopedic and allowed him to teach students how to recognize and defend against threats that other teachers might not even acknowledge existed. The relationship between Godric and Salazar was particularly complex. They had been close friends, perhaps the closest among the 4 founders. They shared drinks together, debated philosophy late into the night, challenged each other to become better wizards and better men. But their fundamental disagreement about blood purity would eventually destroy that friendship. Godric believed that magical ability could manifest in anyone, that Muggle-born witches and wizards deserved the same opportunities as those from old magical families. Salazar saw this as a dangerous naivety, a failure to understand the risks of allowing those with Muggle connections into their sanctuary. The arguments between them grew more heated over time. What had once been friendly debates became bitter disputes. The other 2 founders tried to mediate, with Helga's diplomatic efforts and Rowena's logical arguments. But some differences are too fundamental to bridge. Eventually, Salazar left Hogwarts, but not before creating the Chamber of Secrets deep beneath the castle, a hidden room containing a terrible secret that would lie dormant for nearly 1,000 years. There's a theory, never proven but whispered about in certain circles, that toward the end of his life, Salazar reconciled with the other 3 founders, that he came to see the error in his rigid views about blood purity, that he and Godric found a way to rebuild their friendship before death claimed them. We have no way of knowing if this is true, but I like to think it might be. I like to imagine the 4 of them, old and grey, sitting together one last time before the fire in what would become the staff room, sharing memories of the castle they'd built together, the students they'd taught, the dream they'd made real despite their differences. What they created together has endured for more than 1,000 years. The houses they founded still define the social structure of the school. The values they championed still shape how students are sorted and educated. The magic they poured into the castle's foundations still pulses through its stones and timbers. And the dream they shared of a place where young witches and wizards could learn in safety, away from persecution and fear, continues to welcome new generations of magical children. The sorting hat, which Godric created from his own hat and imbued with the intelligence of all 4 founders, still makes decisions about where students belong based on the qualities those 4 people valued most. Courage for Gryffindor, loyalty for Hufflepuff, wisdom for Ravenclaw, ambition for Slytherin. And in its annual song at the start of term feast, it often reminds students of the importance of unity, of looking beyond house divisions to remember that they're all part of something larger. Something that 4 people with very different backgrounds and beliefs managed to create together. If you listen carefully on quiet nights, some say you can still feel their presence in the castle. Not as ghosts, exactly, but as a kind of lingering essence, a reminder of intention and purpose that soaked into the very fabric of Hogwarts during those foundational years. In the way candlelight flickers in a particular corridor, in the weight of a door closing in the Great Hall, in the whisper of wind through the towers. The founders may be gone, but what they built together remains, patient and enduring, ready to welcome another 1,000 years of students, if that's what the future holds. Chapter 2: The Living, Breathing Castle. There's a certain time of night, usually somewhere between midnight and dawn, when Hogwarts truly comes into its own. The students are asleep in their dormitories, curled under warm quilts embroidered with house colours. The teachers have retired to their private quarters, most of them, though occasionally you'll find one still awake, grading essays by wandlight or reading in a comfortable chair. The ghosts drift through walls and floors, going about their nocturnal routines. And the castle itself seems to wake up in a way it can't during the bustle of the day. You can feel it if you're quiet enough, if you stand very still in one of the corridors and just listen. The stones breathe, not with lungs, but with something deeper, something that comes from centuries of magic, accumulating in every timber and tile. The staircases shift with soft creaks and groans, moving into new configurations that might surprise students in the morning. Portraits whisper to their neighbours, sharing gossip or arguing about events from centuries past. Suits of armour settle with little clinks and clatters. And underneath it all, there's a kind of heartbeat, a rhythm that you feel more than hear, the pulse of a building that's become something more than the sum of its architectural parts. Hogwarts Castle stands 7 stories tall, though that number is a bit deceptive, because the towers extend far higher, and the dungeons delve much deeper. 142 staircases wind their way through the structure, connecting the various levels and wings in ways that don't always make logical sense from an engineering perspective. Some of these staircases are grand affairs, wide enough for a dozen students to walk abreast, with ornate banisters and landings decorated with suits of armour or ancient tapestries. Others are narrow and winding, spiralling up into towers or down into depths where few students venture. And they move. Oh, how they move. This is perhaps the castle's most famous quirk, the one that causes the most confusion for first-year students and the most resigned sighs from 7th years, who really should know better by now, but still occasionally find themselves on the wrong floor. The staircases shift positions, sometimes mid-climb, leading to destinations they hadn't led to moments before. There's no apparent pattern to it, no schedule that anyone's been able to determine despite centuries of observation. Some professors theorize that the staircases respond to the castle's needs, creating paths to where students need to be, even if that's not where they intended to go. Others suggest that it's simply the castle's way of keeping everyone on their toes, preventing the kind of complacency that comes from always knowing exactly where you're going. Still others think it's just one of those magical quirks that doesn't really need an explanation, like the way the sky stays up, or the way portraits can think and speak despite being made of paint and canvas. The grand staircase is the heart of this mobile network, a massive central shaft that rises from the entrance hall all the way to the 7th floor. Hundreds of portraits line its walls, depicting witches and wizards from throughout the school's history. Some of these painted figures take their responsibilities very seriously, serving as unofficial guides to lost students or passing messages between the living. Others are more mischievous, offering deliberately bad directions or commenting rudely on the appearance of passers-by. A few are deeply philosophical, engaging willing listeners in discussions about the nature of magic, the meaning of courage, the purpose of education. The landings on the grand staircase are gathering places, natural meeting spots where students from different houses might encounter one another between classes. On a typical school day, these spaces buzz with conversation and laughter, the clatter of books being dropped, the rustle of robes as students rush past. But at night, they're peaceful, almost meditative. Moonlight streams through tall windows, creating pools of silver light that shift as clouds pass overhead. The portraits doze in their frames, some snoring gently. The stairs themselves seem to rest, not moving quite as frequently as during the day, content to hold their current configuration for a while. There's a particular step on one of these staircases, about halfway up if you're heading toward the 4th floor, that's known to disappear if you step on it. Students learn to remember which one it is, usually after getting their legs stuck through it once or twice. There are also trick steps scattered throughout the castle, placed there either by accident or design. No one's quite sure which. They creak ominously when you step on them, or they sink down a bit farther than expected, or they feel slightly sticky underfoot. These small imperfections are part of the castle's character, reminders that perfection isn't always the goal. The portraits deserve special mention. There are hundreds of them throughout the castle, possibly thousands, if you count all the small ones tucked into alcoves or hung in lesser-used corridors. Each one contains a magical imprint of the person depicted. Not their soul or spirit exactly, but a kind of echo of who they were, imbued with their memories and personality traits, and the ability to think and communicate. The Fat Lady, who guards the entrance to Gryffindor Tower, is perhaps the most famous of these painted guardians. She takes her duty seriously, requiring the correct password before allowing anyone to pass, though she's been known to make exceptions for students locked out late at night, if they can provide a good enough excuse. She's fond of singing, though her talent doesn't quite match her enthusiasm, and she has a friendship with Violet, another portrait hanging nearby, whom she visits regularly to share gossip and wine. Sir Cadogan is another notable portrait personality, a short knight with a tendency toward dramatic declarations and a somewhat inflated sense of his own importance. He was briefly appointed to guard Gryffindor Tower after the Fat Lady was attacked and fled her frame, though his tenure was short-lived. He changed the password so frequently and made it so complicated that students could barely keep up, and he had an unfortunate habit of challenging people to duels at inappropriate times. But most of the portraits are quieter, more contemplative. They watch the students pass by day after day, year after year, century after century. They see patterns that the living can't. Witness the way history repeats itself with variations. Observe how each new generation faces challenges similar to those that came before, but in slightly different forms. Some of them serve as informal archivists, remembering events that happened when they were alive and sharing those memories when asked. Others are simply content to exist, to chat with their neighbours, to comment occasionally on the weather or the quality of the latest batch of first years. The enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall is another marvel that deserves consideration. It's bewitched to mirror the sky outside, a feat of magic so complex that it's still studied by advanced charm work specialists. During the day, it shows a perfect replica of whatever's happening in the heavens above the castle, whether that's brilliant blue with puffy white clouds, grey and drizzling, or clear and bright with a sun that seems to warm the hall without actually affecting the temperature. At night, it displays stars in their proper positions, constellations wheeling slowly overhead as the hours pass. There's something profoundly comforting about dining under that enchanted ceiling. Students can feel connected to the natural world while remaining protected from its harsh elements. They can watch snow fall without getting cold, see lightning flash without feeling endangered, witness the movement of celestial bodies without having to climb to the astronomy tower. It's a reminder that magic, at its best, isn't about domination or control, but about creating harmony between the human world and the natural one. The Great Lake stretches out before the castle, dark and deep and mysterious. Its surface reflects the castle's lights at night, creating a shimmering mirror image that ripples with every breath of wind. Beneath those waters live creatures that most students never see. The giant squid that occasionally surfaces to sun itself on warm days, grindylows lurking in the weeds near shore, merpeople in their underwater village, building structures from lake stone and growing gardens of water plants. In winter, the lake sometimes freezes over, though never completely. There's always a patch of open water near the castle, kept that way by warming charms the groundskeeper maintains. Students are forbidden from walking on the ice, but every few years, someone tries it anyway, usually with embarrassing but not fatal results. In spring, the ice breaks up with great cracks and groans that echo across the grounds, and soon the surface is smooth again, reflecting the green of returning life. The Forbidden Forest stands at the edge of the grounds, a dark line of ancient trees that represents the boundary between the known and the unknown, the controlled and the wild. Students are forbidden from entering it, except under supervised conditions, and for good reason. The forest is home to creatures both wonderful and dangerous. Centaurs who follow the stars and prefer to be left alone. Unicorns whose blood has terrible magical properties. Acromantulas large enough to capture unwary travelers. Bowtruckles that guard their trees with surprising ferocity. But the forest isn't evil exactly. It's simply old and wild and operating according to rules that predate human magic. On quiet nights, you can hear it from the castle, the rustling of leaves, the call of nocturnal birds, the occasional crack of a branch falling, or a large creature moving through the undergrowth. It's a reminder that Hogwarts exists not in isolation, but as part of a larger magical ecosystem, surrounded by forces older and stranger than the castle itself. The castle's towers reach toward the sky like fingers, each with its own purpose and personality. The astronomy tower is the tallest, equipped with telescopes and star charts, open to the elements so students can observe the heavens directly. The Gryffindor Tower is warm and welcoming, its common room a cozy space with comfortable furniture and a fireplace that always seems to burn cheerfully. The Ravenclaw Tower requires students to solve a riddle before entry, keeping the intellectually curious on their toes. The Clock Tower marks time for the entire castle, its great bell tolling out the hours with deep, resonant notes that can be heard throughout the grounds. Down in the dungeons, where the air is cooler and damper, and the light comes mostly from torches, the Slytherin Common Room sits beneath the Great Lake. Through its windows, if you can call them windows, you can sometimes see the shadow of the giant squid passing by, or the silver flash of fish schooling in the depths. It's quieter down here, more isolated, which suits the Slytherin temperament well. The potions classroom is also in the dungeons, where the cool temperature helps preserve ingredients, and where the occasional explosion is contained by thick stone walls. Throughout the castle, there are secret passages, some known to the staff and some not. Some clearly marked on certain magical maps, and others kept secret for centuries. These passages connect distant parts of the castle, provide shortcuts between floors, or lead to places that most people don't know exist. Some require passwords or particular wand movements to access. Others are hidden behind portraits or tapestries or bookcases, revealed only to those who know where to press or what to say. The Room of Requirement is perhaps the most remarkable of the castle's hidden spaces, a room that appears only when someone walks past a particular stretch of wall 3 times while concentrating on what they need. The room then configures itself to provide exactly that, whether it's a place to practice defensive magic, a bathroom, a hiding spot for something that shouldn't be found, or simply a quiet corner to be alone. It's as if the castle itself wants to help, wants to provide what its inhabitants need even before they fully know they need it. As dawn approaches and the sky begins to lighten from black to deep blue to grey, the castle prepares for another day. The portraits begin to wake, stretching in their frames and greeting one another. The staircases settle into their daytime configurations, ready for the rush of students heading to breakfast. The Great Hall's ceiling reflects the coming sunrise, and in the kitchens below, the house elves have already begun preparing the morning meal. But for now, in these last quiet moments, before the day begins, the castle simply is. Ancient and wise, protective and patient, alive in ways that architecture shouldn't be, but magical enough to transcend such limitations. It stands as it has stood for more than a millennium, a sanctuary built by 4 people who dared to dream of something better, maintained by generations who understood the value of what they'd inherited, ready to shelter and educate and protect whoever might need it for as long as magic endures in the world. Chapter 3: The Gentle Rhythms of Magical Learning. If you've never attended a magical school, it might be difficult to imagine what the daily routine looks like, how one organizes a day around the study of subjects that can't be found in any Muggle curriculum. But there's a beautiful rhythm to life at Hogwarts, a pattern that repeats year after year with small variations, creating a sense of continuity and tradition that students find comforting even when they don't consciously recognize it. The day begins early, around 7 in the morning, when the first students start making their way down to the Great Hall for breakfast. The house elves have been working since before dawn, preparing vast quantities of food that appear on the tables as if by magic, because of course it is magic, just not the wand-waving, incantation-speaking kind that students learn in class. It's the older, quieter magic of service and care, of preparing nourishment not just for the body, but for the spirit. The Great Hall, during breakfast, is a different place than it is during formal feasts. The ceiling still shows the sky, but there's a softness to the early morning light, a gentle quality that feels full of potential. Students drift in gradually, some barely awake and moving on autopilot toward their house tables, others chatty and energetic despite the hour. Teachers sit at the staff table, some reading the Daily Prophet while they eat, others engaged in quiet conversation. The food itself is remarkably varied. Traditional English breakfast items like eggs, bacon, sausages, toast, and porridge form the foundation, but there are also more unusual offerings, nods to the diverse backgrounds of the students and staff. Pumpkin juice is a staple, that peculiar beverage that somehow tastes exactly right, even though its main ingredient should probably make it strange. There are always fresh fruits, pastries, jams in a dozen different flavors, and tea or coffee for those who need the caffeine to face the day ahead. Owl Post arrives during breakfast, a daily spectacle of dozens or sometimes hundreds of owls swooping in through the high windows, delivering letters and packages to their intended recipients before departing again. It's chaotic and messy, and occasionally results in food being knocked over or owl droppings landing somewhere unfortunate. But it's also one of those uniquely magical moments that never gets old, even after 7 years of witnessing it every morning. Classes begin at 9, and here's where the real magic of magical education reveals itself. Transfiguration, taught for many years by Professor McGonagall, is perhaps the most intellectually demanding of the core subjects. It requires not just the correct wand movement and incantation, but a deep understanding of the nature of the object being transformed and what it's being transformed into. Early lessons focus on simple transformations, like turning a match into a needle. But by the time students reach their 7th year, they're attempting human transfiguration, one of the most complex and dangerous forms of magic that exists. The classroom where transfiguration is taught is neat and orderly, which reflects the subject matter. Desks are arranged in precise rows. The blackboard is always clean unless Professor McGonagall is actively writing on it. Everything has its place, and woe betide the student who tries to create chaos in this space. But there's also a kind of beauty to it, a recognition that transformation requires discipline, that changing the fundamental nature of something isn't a matter of casual whimsy, but serious magical work. Charms is different. Professor Flitwick's classroom has a more relaxed energy, though the work is no less demanding. Charms are spells that add properties to objects, rather than transforming their fundamental nature. Levitation charms summoning charms, cheering charms, protection charms. The list is endless, and each one requires its own specific technique. Flitwick himself often demonstrates from atop a pile of books that lets him see over his desk. His enthusiasm for his subject, infectious even for students who find the work challenging. The thing about charms is that they're everywhere in the wizarding world. Nearly everything magical relies on some form of charm work. The Floo network that lets wizards travel by fireplace is sustained by charms. The enchantments that keep Muggle technology from working properly around magic are charms. The protections around homes and buildings. The conveniences that make everyday life easier. The small magical touches that transform the mundane into the wonderful. All of it comes back to the foundational principles taught in charms class. Potions, taught for years in the dungeons by Professor Snape, and later by Professor Slughorn, is a precise and unforgiving subject. Unlike spell work, where a talented wizard might sometimes achieve results despite imperfect technique, potions require exact measurements, specific stirring patterns, precise timing. Add ingredients in the wrong order, and the best case scenario is that your potion simply doesn't work. Worst case, it explodes, fills the room with toxic fumes, or transforms into something actively dangerous. The potions classroom smells of 1,000 different ingredients. Some pleasant like peppermint and rose, others decidedly not, like sulfur and pickled slugs. Cauldrons simmer on every desk, their contents bubbling in different colors and consistencies. Along the walls, shelves are lined with jars containing everything imaginable. Unicorn horn shavings, flobberworm mucus, powdered moonstone, essence of belladonna. Each ingredient has its properties, its proper preparation, its specific uses. Learning potions is as much about memorization as it is about technique. Understanding not just what to do, but why each step matters. There's a meditative quality to brewing potions if you approach it with the right mindset. The careful measuring, the rhythmic stirring, the patient waiting as transformations occur at their own pace. You can't rush a properly brewed potion. You must work with time rather than against it, allowing ingredients to meld and react according to their nature. Some students find this frustrating, but others discover a kind of peace in it, a way of being present with the work that demands their full attention. Defense against the dark arts has always been the most unstable subject at Hogwarts, cursed in ways that no one fully understands to never keep the same teacher for more than a year. Some of these professors have been competent, others brilliant, a few downright dangerous or incompetent. But the subject itself remains crucial. The world contains genuine threats, real darkness that doesn't care about good intentions or pure hearts. Students need to know how to recognize these threats and defend themselves against them. The classroom where defense against the dark arts is taught changes character with each new professor, reflecting their particular approach to the subject. Under one teacher, it might be filled with cages containing dark creatures for students to practice against. Under another, it's arranged like a dueling chamber with plenty of space to move and cast. Sometimes it's theoretical, with diagrams and charts covering the walls. Other times, it's intensely practical, with students spending more time on their feet than in their seats. The best defense against the dark arts professors understand that the subject isn't just about spells and counterspells. It's about awareness, about recognizing when something is wrong, about knowing when to fight and when to flee. It's about understanding that darkness comes in many forms, some obvious and some subtle, and that defending against it requires more than just magical skill. It requires judgment, courage, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the best defense is not engaging at all. Herbology takes place in the greenhouses, a cluster of glass buildings where the temperature and humidity are carefully controlled to accommodate plants from all over the magical world. Professor Sprout oversees this green empire with a gentle but firm hand, teaching students about the properties and care of magical plants. Some are beautiful and benign, like the silvery flutterby bush, whose leaves create gentle breezes. Others are decidedly dangerous, like the venomous tentacula with its reaching tendrils and poisonous bite, or the mandrakes, whose cries can be fatal to anyone who hears them. Working with plants teaches patience. They grow at their own pace, respond to care in their own time. You can't force a bouncing bulb to mature faster than it's ready to. Can't convince a snargaluff to be less hostile than its nature dictates. You work with what each plant is, understanding its needs, respecting its properties. There's something grounding about it, literally putting your hands in soil, tending to living things, watching them grow and change through the seasons. The greenhouses are warm and humid, filled with the earthy smell of rich soil and growing things. Steam rises from certain plots where tropical plants require extra heat. Water trickles through irrigation systems. The glass panes are often fogged with condensation, creating a sense of being enclosed in a world separate from the one outside. Students work in pairs or small groups, hands dirty, focused on the tasks assigned to them, learning through doing rather than just reading or listening. History of Magic, taught by the ghost Professor Binns, has an unfortunate reputation as the most boring class at Hogwarts. The professor died in his sleep many years ago and simply continued teaching as a ghost, apparently not noticing, or perhaps not caring about his change in status. He drones on in a monotone voice about goblin rebellions and giant wars, dates and names blurring together until even the most dedicated students find their attention wandering. But the content, when you can stay awake long enough to absorb it, is actually fascinating. The magical world has a rich and complex history stretching back thousands of years. Wizards built civilizations, fought wars, made great discoveries, and committed terrible atrocities. They allied with other magical beings, and then betrayed those alliances. They created wonders and horrors in roughly equal measure. Understanding this history provides context for the present, helps students recognize that the challenges they face aren't new, that every generation has had to grapple with questions of power and ethics, and how to live well in a world that doesn't always make sense. Astronomy classes take place at midnight in the Astronomy Tower, the only class that meets in the middle of the night. Students gather with their telescopes and star charts, learning to identify planets and stars and moons, to understand their movements and properties. Magic is tied to celestial cycles in ways that aren't fully understood, but observing the heavens is considered essential knowledge for any properly educated witch or wizard. There's something special about being awake and working while the rest of the castle sleeps. The astronomy tower is open to the elements, and on clear nights, the sky above is magnificent. Stars so bright and numerous that they seem close enough to touch. The air is cold and crisp, making students bundle in their warmest cloaks. Professor Sinistra's voice is quiet as she guides them through the lesson, pointing out constellations and explaining their significance. On cloudy nights, when observation isn't possible, astronomy becomes more theoretical, students learning the mathematics of orbital mechanics, the properties of different celestial bodies, the ways that magical creatures and plants respond to lunar phases. It's one of the few magical subjects that overlaps significantly with Muggle science, though magical astronomy includes considerations that Muggle astronomers would find baffling. The school day typically ends around dinner time, with students free to spend their evenings however they choose. Some retreat to the library to work on homework or research. Others gather in their common rooms, playing games, chatting, simply relaxing after a day of intensive learning. Quidditch practice happens several evenings a week for those on house teams, weather permitting. Various clubs and organizations meet according to their schedules. The library is perhaps the heart of self-directed learning at Hogwarts. Madame Pince, the librarian, guards her domain with fierce protectiveness, maintaining strict rules about proper book handling and enforcing absolute quiet. The library contains thousands of volumes on every magical subject imaginable, from the practical to the obscure, from recently published works to books so old their pages crumble at the edges. The restricted section occupies one corner of the library, cordoned off and requiring special permission to access. Here are books on advanced dark magic, dangerous spells, forbidden knowledge that students shouldn't encounter until they're mature enough to understand the risks. Some of these books are literally dangerous, with covers that burn the hands of unauthorized readers, or pages that try to trap the unwary. Others contain information that's simply too powerful to be used casually. Spells and rituals that could cause terrible harm if performed without proper understanding and preparation. But most of the library is open to all students, a resource available for everything from completing homework assignments to pursuing personal interests that extend beyond the standard curriculum. Students researching essays can be found hunched over books at the long tables, quills scratching on parchment, ink bottles carefully positioned to avoid spills. Those seeking knowledge for its own sake wander the stacks, pulling volumes that catch their interest, settling into comfortable chairs to read for hours. The library has its own particular atmosphere, a quality of concentrated thought and quiet discovery. Dust motes dance in shafts of light from the tall windows. The smell of old paper and leather bindings fills the air. Shelves stretch up toward the high ceiling, accessible by ladders that slide along tracks. In the far corners, where fewer students venture, you can find books on subjects so specialized that they might go years between readings, waiting patiently for the one person who needs exactly the information they contain. Outside of formal classes and independent study, there are traditions that shape the rhythm of the school year. The house system creates a competitive framework that encourages students to excel, with points awarded for achievement and deducted for for rule breaking. The house that accumulates the most points by year's end wins the House Cup, a prize that brings tremendous pride and bragging rights. Quidditch provides another layer of rivalry and excitement. The sport itself is uniquely magical, played on broomsticks hundreds of feet in the air, requiring not just athletic ability, but courage and skill in managing a flying object while trying to score goals, defend, or catch the tiny golden snitch. Matches are held on Saturdays, weather permitting, and the entire school turns out to watch, houses cheering for their teams with voices that echo across the grounds. There's something primal about watching a Quidditch match, something that transcends the actual stakes of the game. Students paint their faces in house colours, wave banners that move and flash, with enchanted patterns, shout encouragement, and occasionally creative insults at players and referees. Teachers are supposed to maintain decorum, but often get just as caught up in the excitement. Even those who don't particularly care about sport find themselves drawn into the energy of it, the collective experience of hoping and cheering and groaning in unison. Holidays punctuate the school year, providing breaks from the routine of classes and creating peaks of celebration that students look forward to. Halloween brings the Great Hall transformed with floating jack-o'-lanterns and a feast of autumn specialties. Christmas turns the castle into a winter wonderland, with a massive tree in the Great Hall and decorations throughout the corridors. Those who stay at school over the holiday break experience a different, quieter version of Hogwarts, with smaller class sizes and a cozier, more intimate atmosphere. The Christmas feast is particularly special for those who remain. The Great Hall is decked in silver and gold, with enchanted snow falling from the ceiling that vanishes before it reaches the tables. The food is extraordinary, even by Hogwarts standards, with traditional dishes like roast turkey and Christmas pudding alongside more whimsical offerings. Crackers pop with small explosions, releasing not just paper hats, but actual live mice, or streams of coloured smoke, or entire flocks of tiny magical birds that flutter around the hall before vanishing. Valentine's Day brings its own particular energy, with students trying to navigate the complicated terrain of crushes and relationships. In certain years, the celebration has been particularly elaborate, with dwarves dressed as cupids delivering singing valentines, much to the embarrassment of recipients. More typically, it's observed with the exchange of cards and small gifts, with varying degrees of subtlety depending on the boldness of the sender. The end of the year brings exams, a stressful time when the castle's usual energy shifts toward anxiety and intense study. The library becomes more crowded than ever. Common rooms fill with students quizzing each other, or desperately trying to memorize material they should have learned months ago. Fifth-year students face their ordinary wizarding level exams, and seventh years their nastily exhausting wizarding tests, both of which have significant implications for their future career options. The exam period has its own particular quality, a heightened awareness of time passing, of the knowledge that these tests will be evaluated by external examiners from the Ministry of Magic. That performance here matters in ways that regular classwork doesn't. But even in the stress, there's a kind of shared experience, a sense that everyone is going through this together, that the struggle is collective, even if the performance is individual. And then, suddenly, it's over. The last exam is completed, papers are handed in, and students can finally relax. The final feast of the year celebrates the winning house and marks the transition from this year to the next. The Great Hall is decorated in the colours of whichever house has won the House Cup, and there's a bittersweet quality to the celebration, especially for 7th years who know they won't be returning. The train ride back to London at the end of term is different from the journey that brought students to school. They're older now than they were in September, even if only by months. They've learned new things, made new friends, had experiences that changed them in ways they might not fully recognize yet. The compartments are loud with conversation as students exchange addresses and promises to write over the summer, make plans for how they'll spend their time away from school, reflect on the year that's ending, and then they're back in the Muggle world, saying goodbye to friends, finding their families waiting on the platform, heading back to homes that suddenly feel a bit too small, a bit too ordinary after months at Hogwarts. But they carry the castle with them, in memories and friendships and knowledge, in the confidence that comes from mastering difficult magic, in the understanding that they're part of something larger and older and more wonderful than they might have imagined possible. The castle, meanwhile, settles into its summer quiet. The students are gone, the teachers mostly departed, the house elves handling maintenance without the chaos of hundreds of young people in residence. But it's not empty, not really. The ghosts remain, and the portraits, and the castle itself, patient and enduring, waiting for September, when it will wake again to the sound of young voices and the practice of magic, ready to begin another year of doing what it's done for more than a millennium, teaching, protecting, and providing a home away from home for those who need it most. Chapter 4: Whispered Legends and Forgotten Lore. Every old building accumulates stories the way that corners accumulate dust, and Hogwarts has had more than 1,000 years to gather its collection of legends, myths, and half-remembered histories. Some of these tales are well known, repeated by students year after year, until they've become part of the official lore. Others are more obscure, whispered in dark corridors, or discovered in the margins of old books. Fragments of something larger that's been mostly forgotten. The ghosts of Hogwarts are perhaps the most visible reminder of the castle's long history. There are said to be about 20 of them in residence at any given time, though the exact number fluctuates, and there may be others that prefer to keep themselves hidden. Each chose to remain in the world after death, rather than moving on to whatever comes next, and each had their reasons for making that choice. Nearly Headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, is one of the most sociable and well-known. His full name was Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, and he died on the 31st of October in 1492, executed with a blunt axe that required 45 chops to complete the job, leaving his head hanging by a thread of skin and sinew. He's sensitive about this, preferring to be called Nearly Headless Nick, rather than by his full title, though he can never quite let it go either, demonstrating his condition to anyone who asks by pulling his head to the side to show how it's barely attached. Nick is genial and helpful, proud of his house, and protective of Gryffindor students. He's been at Hogwarts for more than 500 years, watching generation after generation of students pass through, remembering a version of the castle that's subtly different from the one that exists now. He knows the schedules of all the staircases, can recommend the fastest routes between classes, and occasionally intervenes when he sees students heading toward trouble, though his ability to affect the physical world is limited. The Fat Friar represents Hufflepuff House, a jolly, rotund ghost who was likely a medieval cleric in life. He's forgiving to a fault, always willing to give people second chances, eager to see the best in everyone. Students who've gotten into minor trouble sometimes seek him out, knowing he'll be sympathetic and might even intercede on their behalf with the authorities. He's less concerned with the details of what happened centuries ago and more interested in the present moment, in the students currently in residence and how they're managing their education. The Grey Lady is Ravenclaw's ghost, and she's far more reserved than either Nick or the Friar. Her real name was Helena Ravenclaw, daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw herself, and her story is tragic. She stole her mother's diadem, believing it would make her wiser than her mother, and fled to Albania. Rowena sent a man who loved Helena to find her and bring her home. But when Helena refused to return, he killed her in a rage, and then killed himself out of remorse. This man became the Bloody Baron, Slytherin's ghost, forever bound to the castle where Helena's spirit resides, both of them condemned to relive their worst moments for eternity. Helena is solemn and withdrawn, rarely speaking to students except when directly addressed. She drifts through the corridors of Ravenclaw Tower like mist, there and then gone, often lost in thoughts of the past. The weight of her story hangs around her like the robes she wears, a reminder that not all of Hogwarts' history is comfortable or happy, that the castle has witnessed tragedy as well as triumph. The Bloody Baron himself is the most frightening of the house ghosts, covered in silver bloodstains that never fade, chains clanking as he moves through the dungeons. Students generally avoid him if possible. He speaks rarely, and when he does, it's usually to enforce discipline or express disapproval. Even Peeves, the poltergeist who terrorizes students and teachers alike, respects the Baron's authority and will sometimes obey his commands when he ignores everyone else's. The Baron's presence is a reminder that Slytherin House, for all its ambition and cunning, has a darkness at its core, a connection to choices made in anger and desperation that had permanent, terrible consequences. But he's also a cautionary tale, a warning about what can happen when love curdles into obsession and rejection leads to violence. He's condemned to haunt the place where the woman he killed resides, forever reminded of what he did, forever unable to change it or make amends. Beyond the house ghosts, there are others who drift through the castle. Professor Binns, the history of magic teacher, died in his sleep in the staff room, and simply got up the next morning to teach as a ghost, apparently not realizing, or perhaps not caring, that he'd passed on. There are ghosts of students who died young, still wearing their school robes, forever the age they were when they perished. Some of these are friendly, others sad, a few actively hostile to the living out of resentment for what they lost. Moaning Myrtle is one of the more troublesome student ghosts, a girl who died in the second-floor girls' bathroom when the Chamber of Secrets was opened in the 1940s. She haunts that bathroom, flooding it regularly, moaning about her death and her miserable afterlife, occasionally venturing out to haunt other locations if she feels particularly upset. Students generally avoid her bathroom if possible, though some find her sympathetic, a lonely spirit who just wants someone to acknowledge her pain. Then there are the creatures that aren't ghosts, but still represent connections to the past. The portraits, as mentioned earlier, contain echoes of the people they depict, magical imprints that can think and communicate and move between frames. Some of these portraits are of headmasters and headmistresses who once led the school, their images hanging in the headmaster's office, so they can offer advice to the current occupant. These portrait headmasters represent an unbroken chain of leadership stretching back to the school's founding. They've seen everything: periods of prosperity and decline, times of peace and war, the evolution of magical education over centuries. They argue with each other, forming factions based on philosophy or the era they lived in. Some are wise and helpful, others pompous and annoying. But collectively, they represent institutional memory, a resource that ensures Hogwarts never completely forgets its history. The castle itself contains physical remnants of its past. There are entire wings that were built and then later abandoned, sealed off for reasons that might have made sense at the time, but have since been forgotten. There are classrooms that haven't been used in decades, still containing desks and teaching materials from different eras. There are storage rooms filled with broken or obsolete magical objects, things that once had purpose, but are now just relics gathering dust. One of the most mysterious aspects of Hogwarts is the Room of Requirement, which was mentioned earlier. The room has been discovered and lost and rediscovered countless times throughout the castle's history. It appears when someone needs it, provides exactly what's required, and then disappears again, leaving no trace. Students who stumble upon it often think they're the first to find it, not realizing that generations of students before them discovered the same space, used it for their own purposes, and then forgot about it when they no longer needed it. The room has been many things over the years: a hiding place for students avoiding punishment or teachers, a practice space for learning spells that couldn't be attempted in normal classrooms, a bathroom for someone caught short, far from the nearest facilities, a repository for things that needed to be hidden, sometimes for a few hours, and sometimes for centuries. The room keeps its secrets, reforming itself with each new user, containing no evidence of what it was before or what it might become next. There are legends about secret chambers beyond the famous Chamber of Secrets, stories of a room where the four founders met to discuss matters of importance, accessible only to those who understood their vision, tales of a library hidden somewhere in the castle containing books too dangerous even for the restricted section, protected by enchantments that would kill anyone who tried to enter without permission. Whispers of a treasure vault where the founders stored artifacts of immense power, waiting for a time when they might be needed. Most of these stories are probably false, or at least highly embellished. But the thing about Hogwarts is that it's impossible to be completely certain. The castle is old enough, and complex enough, and magical enough that almost anything could be hidden within its walls. There might be rooms that no living person knows about, sealed off so long ago that even the portraits don't remember they exist. There could be magical defenses protecting secrets that haven't been relevant for centuries but still function perfectly, waiting for someone who knows the right words or performs the right actions. The Forbidden Forest contains its own collection of myths and legends, stories of ancient magic practiced in clearings deep within the woods, rituals that predate the founding of Hogwarts, or even human civilization. Tales of creatures that appear only once every 100 years, or when the moon is in a particular phase, or when someone with pure intentions wanders far enough from the beaten path. Legends of lost travelers who stumbled upon gatherings of magical beings and were forever changed by what they witnessed. The centaurs who live in the forest are themselves guardians of ancient knowledge. They read prophecies in the movements of stars and planets, understanding patterns that are invisible to wizards. They're deeply protective of their autonomy and generally disdainful of human magic, which they view as crude and short-sighted. But occasionally, they'll share insights with someone they deem worthy, offering glimpses into futures that might be, or warnings about paths that shouldn't be taken. The Mer people in the Great Lake have their own civilization beneath the waters, with architecture and art and social structures that mirror and yet differ from those on land. Their language sounds like screeching above water, but becomes clear and melodious beneath the surface. They keep to themselves mostly, occasionally trading with wizards, but never fully trusting them, remembering times when magical folk sought to dominate or exploit them. There are legends about objects hidden within the castle, artifacts of great power that have been lost or deliberately concealed. Some say that Godric Gryffindor's sword wasn't the only thing he left behind, that there's armor somewhere that would protect the wearer from any curse, or a shield that could deflect even the killing curse. Stories claim that Helga Hufflepuff created other objects beyond her famous cup, practical items imbued with magic that would nourish or heal or provide comfort to whoever possessed them. Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem became the subject of numerous legends after it disappeared. Some believed it was stolen by jealous rivals. Others thought she'd hidden it herself, intending to retrieve it later, but dying before she could. Still, others whispered that it had never existed at all, that it was just a story Rowena told to make herself seem more impressive. The truth, as it turned out, was darker than any of the legends, but it remained hidden for nearly 1,000 years. The castle's protective enchantments are themselves the stuff of legend. Hogwarts is said to be one of the most well-defended locations in the magical world, protected by layers upon layers of spells cast over centuries. Some of these protections are obvious, like the enchantments that prevent muggles from seeing anything except a ruin, with warnings about danger if they approach. Others are more subtle, woven into the very fabric of the castle, activating only when specific conditions are met. There are tales of invading forces that tried to attack Hogwarts at various points in its history, armies that found themselves unable to approach or were turned around without realizing it, dark wizards who attempted to breach the castle's defenses and were repelled by magic they didn't even know was there. The castle protects its own, and while that protection isn't absolute, as history has sadly proven, it's formidable enough that most threats never make it past the boundaries of the grounds. One of the quieter legends concerns the house elves who serve the castle. They number in the dozens, perhaps more than 100, working tirelessly in the kitchens and throughout the building to keep everything functioning smoothly. They're bound to the castle by magic that goes back to the founding, and they take fierce pride in their service. But there are stories that suggest their relationship with Hogwarts goes deeper than simple employment, that they're connected to the castle in ways that wizards don't fully understand, that they can sense its moods and needs in ways that human inhabitants cannot. Some believe that the house elves could, if they chose, make the castle uninhabitable simply by refusing to work. That the magic holding Hogwarts together depends in some fundamental way on their constant maintenance and care. Others dismiss this as nonsense, insisting that the elves are merely servants who happen to be very good at their jobs. But the truth, as with so many things about Hogwarts, likely lies somewhere in between, in that grey space where magic and intention and centuries of accumulated practice create something that transcends simple explanations. There are whispers about students who never left Hogwarts, not as ghosts, but as something else. Those who loved the castle so much that they found ways to remain even after their official education ended, hiding in forgotten corners, sustained by magic they taught themselves or discovered in the depths of the library. These are probably just stories, but every few decades there are reports of someone seeing a figure in outdated robes, wandering the corridors at odd hours. Someone who doesn't match any current student or staff member, who disappears when approached or observed too closely. The castle's awareness, if it truly has such a thing, is another subject of quiet speculation. Does Hogwarts think? Does it feel? Does it have preferences about who walks its corridors? What magic is practiced within its walls? The evidence is largely anecdotal. Students report that certain doors seem to open more easily for some people than others. Staircases allegedly change at convenient moments, creating paths that weren't there seconds before. Rooms arrange themselves in ways that seem almost helpful, as if the castle itself wants to facilitate whatever's happening within its walls. If the castle is aware, it's patient beyond human comprehension. It's watched more than 40 generations of students pass through its halls. It's witnessed the best and worst of humanity, moments of incredible courage and terrible cruelty. It's survived wars and peace, prosperity and neglect, always enduring, always ready to shelter those who need it. And if it has opinions about any of this, it keeps them mostly to itself, expressing its nature through subtle influences rather than direct action. As midnight approaches and we wander these corridors together, it's easy to feel the weight of all this history, all these accumulated stories pressing in from the shadows. The castle breathes its age into every space, every stone. The past isn't dead here. It's not even past, really. It's present in the architecture, in the magic that pulses through the foundations, in the ghosts and portraits and enchanted objects that serve as living connections to eras long concluded. But there's comfort in that too, knowing that you're part of something so much larger than yourself, that your brief time here connects you to centuries of students who walked these same paths, learned these same lessons, made these same mistakes and discoveries. the castle remembers, even if individual people forget. And in its memory, everyone who's ever belonged to Hogwarts remains, not as ghosts or portraits, but as echoes in the stone, whispers in the wind, shadows that lengthen across floors, worn smooth by countless footsteps. The legends will continue to accumulate, new stories layering over old ones, some proving true and others fading into the realm of pure myth. And the castle will continue to stand, patient and enduring, keeping its secrets while gradually revealing others, providing shelter and education and home to anyone with magic in their veins and a willingness to learn. This is its purpose, has been for more than 1,000 years, and will be, if fortune allows, for 1,000 more. The night is at its deepest now, that hour when time seems to slow, when the boundary between waking and sleeping grows thin and permeable. The castle is completely quiet, except for those small sounds that buildings make, the settling and breathing of a structure that stood for centuries and will stand for centuries more. The magical light that's never completely absent has dimmed to barely a glow. The portraits have all fallen silent, even those who usually gossip through the night. If you close your eyes now, you might be able to feel it. The weight of all that history, all those accumulated years, pressing gently down like a comfortable blanket. The sense of being held by something larger than yourself. Something that was here long before you arrived, and will be here long after you're gone. The castle as protector, as teacher, as home. Hogwarts in its truest form, patient and enduring, and filled with a kind of love that doesn't announce itself, but simply is. Let yourself rest now. Let the stories fade into the background, becoming just a gentle murmur, like distant conversation or wind through trees. Feel the warmth of the dying fire, the softness of the chair beneath you, the safety of thick stone walls keeping the night at bay. You're welcome here, in this tower, in this castle, in this moment, suspended between day and day. The magic will still be here when you wake. The corridors will still wind through the building in their impossible configurations. The Great Hall will still serve its feasts under the enchanted ceiling. Students will still hurry to class, still study in the library, still play Quidditch on Saturday afternoons. The ghosts will drift, the portraits will gossip, the house elves will work their endless magic in the kitchens below. But for now, for these last quiet hours before dawn, the castle simply is, breathing its ancient breath, holding its accumulated wisdom, standing watch over the generations that have passed through its halls and the generations yet to come. Let it hold you too, just for now. Let Hogwarts shelter you as it has sheltered so many others, as it will shelter countless more in the years ahead. Sleep well, dear wanderer. The castle will keep its vigil while you rest. And when morning comes, soft and gentled with pale light creeping across the Scottish Highlands, Hogwarts will still be here, patient and enduring, ready to welcome another day, another year, another century of magic and learning and home. The candle beside you gutters one final time and goes out, leaving only the faint glow of embers in the hearth. The darkness is complete, but not frightening, soft and welcoming, like closing your eyes after a long day. The night holds you gently. The castle breathes around you. And somewhere in the distance, so faint you might be imagining it, you hear the sound of an owl calling, a note of life and wildness that reminds you that magic is real, that wonder exists, that some dreams are solid enough to stand on stone foundations and endure for 1,000 years. Rest now. Let the stories carry you into sleep. Hogwarts will be here when you return, as it has always been, as it always will be, waiting patiently in the Scottish Highlands, a sanctuary of magic and learning, where anyone with wonder in their heart can always find their way home. Thank you for wandering these candlelit halls with me tonight. If you enjoyed this gentle journey through Hogwarts, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to The Sleeping Sleuth for more cozy stories and magical explorations. Until next time, sleep well, dream deeply, and may you always find your way to platform 9 3/4 when you need it most. Good night.